Hi, Tom.
Hey, Ethan
Here we are with so
and
far
friends.
a few of our friends. Yeah. The check-in question that I was thinking about today, and I'll repeat it a couple times as folks are joining, is something like, what are you choosing to focus on today? So I'm going to put that as the little sticky message at the top here. This is
Beat
our,
you to it.
you
Beat you to
did?
it.
Oh my
Yep.
gosh, amazing. Wow, that was quick. Good Lord.
But
All
it's
right,
funny now I don't know how to pin it.
I'm going to put it, I'm going to
So
beat you to it. Okay, there we go. What do you choose? So, Tom, let's just check in here with our friends who are joining. What are you choosing to focus on today?
what am I choosing to focus on today? It's a great question. I think I'm trying to focus on, in this current moment, not being too obnoxiously loud because I'm outside at a cafe. And I one time was like told in a cafe when I was on a Zoom meeting, I was like approached by the barista and was like, "You need to stop talking so loudly." So I'm gonna try to keep it calm and you know hearable, audible, but also refrained and contained, so not feed into the anxiety and the hysteria because I think that's a good theme for October 18th.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm choosing to focus on it's something like it's not quite spaciousness, but it's like a cousin of spaciousness, which is sort of like I think I tend to want to do things fast and like and I think I'm trying to do things that like I think I'm trying to more it's like go back and forth between times when I go fast and times when I go slow. So it's kind of like I'm trying to find more of like a medium tempo because I think I just like often ramp things up. Some other folks are checking in with well in the check-in question, by the way, if you're just joining us, hi, what are you choosing to focus on today? We've got next level edits on supplements. Hi, Leslie. Getting more exercise. Yay, John. I'm a fan. Let's see. Kate's working on serving each student well. Amen to that. Listening from Kathleen. Hi, Kathleen. Increased productivity and starting my ED application. I love that you're starting your ED application. Just want to say, and I'll say this again at the end, if you find after this webinar that you're like, you know what? I don't know if I necessarily want to do an ED application. I just want you to know that it's totally okay to apply regular decision and it's fine. It's totally fine. I mean, I want to like breathe a little. Tom and I are going to like find ways to hopefully breathe a little air into the space today. So, hi and welcome to 10 ways to level up your college application. Before you click the submit button, I'm your co-host Ethan. I'm the college essay guy. What should you know about me? I love board games, snacks, and long walks, and I think about this stuff a lot, and I've been thinking about it a lot for the past 20 years, for the better part of 20 years, the best part of 20 years. I use he, him pronouns, and what else should you know about me? I don't know. I really care about y'all doing well, and I love productivity and efficiency, and that's going to be a theme that I bring today. Tom, introduce yourself.
You got it. So, hi everyone. My name is Tom Campbell. I also use he/him pronouns, and I have not been thinking about this for 20 years of my life because I am 31. So, 11, I was ziplining, scootering around. I think maybe few years later, I got a ripstick. That was really in for a while when I was a kid. Um, but in my more current iterations, the reason why I'm here is not because of my rip sticking skills. It's because I have a background in college admissions, particularly highly selective admissions. So after I graduated from college and did some postgraduate service, I worked for 2 years at my alma mater, College of the Holy Cross, in the admissions office there. So got to see what it was like at a school with about a 35% acceptance rate. So, selective, but not so highly rejected. And then I transitioned to working at a school with a 7% admit rate, Pomona College in Southern California, where I really got to see kind of just how competitive it is at some of these really, these schools with these really, really low acceptance rates. So I'm here definitely to kind of provide that insight and perspective of what it's like on the other side of the desk for you all as attendees, students, families, and counselors. And I also have worked as a college counselor in a high school setting as well, with students applying to a lot of these more selective schools. I can, of course, speak more broadly beyond that. Those are not the only schools that we, have expertise on at College Essay Guy. Those just tend to be the ones that we get lots of questions about because they often have a lot of essays that students have to write. So yeah, hopefully I can provide a little bit of wisdom at my 31-year-old. And I'm very, if you really knew me, you know that I'm very self-conscious right now because on Zoom, I usually have like, a little bit of like softening lighting. And so right now
You're
I'm kind
good.
of,
You're
you
good.
know,
You look beautiful. You look
thank you.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Here's what we're talking about. I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off because I just think you look so fabulous. Here are quick PSAs. If you're not familiar with it, we've got a podcast. Tom was my guest on season 3, and that's where we met and fell for one another. And that's why we're coming to you now, because I was like, hey, Tom, you should come work with me. Not literally after that podcast, but that's where we met. Here are some podcasts that are some of the latest ones. If you're not familiar with them, I did one on self-care with Angel Perez, and then I did a follow-up one on creating a morning ritual. If that's something that you, after November 1st, are into, we've got some ones on how do you, for those of you who are maybe not seniors, interested in like thinking about your course planning. What are some things, that you should be thinking about post-SCOTUS, the Supreme Court decision? Why you don't have to write about trauma in your college essay to stand out. I've got a podcast in English and Spanish on things for Latinx families. And there's a supplemental deep dive with Rick Diaz. We also have a bunch of resources, and I will stop sharing my screen and reshare it here. On the after the Supreme Court released the decision to ban race-conscious admissions, we worked on some resources, including, is it okay to talk about race in your college application? And if so, how? Short answer, spoiler alert, yes, it is okay to talk about race in your application, but there's a particular way that you should do it, and I'll share more about that later in the session. We've got some exercises for finding out what are the different identities that you want to share with colleges. We've got a resource particularly on those quote-unquote diversity prompts. So this is any of those essay prompts that asks you about, hey, we've got a diverse community. What are you bringing to the community? Some more of the podcasts that I mentioned, and lots of resources for college admission officers. So if you're and there aren't a ton of school, side or college side folks, but we've got resources for college side folks. But we've got also a bunch of resources for counselors. Like, for example, how do you uplevel your school profile? So you're making sure that colleges really have context on your students. And then the other thing to let you know about is the Common App Review. This is our, Complete App Review. We've got a cool process that basically reviews students' essays. We look at all of your essays and application together. You get really detailed feedback. Tom will share more about this at the end of the session, but we give really, really detailed feedback. And the fun fact is that we're going to be giving away a free complete app review at the end of the session. So if you stay to the end, this is like a, $500 value or something. Tom and the team gives lots of love and care and attention to helping you make sure that your application is the best it can be. And we'll share more about that. In order to qualify for it, we're going to put a form link in. Thanks, Tom. And we're going to put a link in the form. We're going to put a form in the chat that when you click the link, give us a little feedback on stuff that you like or would like more of at CEG, and that's how you'll be entered to win a free complete application review. All right, let's jump in. So the things we're going to cover today are, I'm going to talk to you about how do you know if your application is doing its job and what actually is the job of your application. I'm going to talk to you about 3 different ways that you can improve your activities list. Tom's going to share 2 qualities that your supplemental essays should demonstrate, because look at that. Look at the balloons. I don't even know how those balloons are happening. I love it though. And then I'm going to do an analysis of a whole application that I think is just a really awesome one with a student who I worked with a few years ago. So first of all, let's start with, how do you know your application is doing its job? So let's define what we mean by doing its job. So when I think of the college application, the purpose of this whole thing is to demonstrate the skills, qualities, values, and interests that you're bringing with you to the college campus. And how do you even know what they're going to be seeing? What are the different sides of you? So what I would recommend doing is opening up a Google Doc, and at the title of it, just say almost done, and then put your name. This is what we call an almost done doc at CEG. CEG just stands for College Essay Guy. And essentially, what I want you to put in that doc is I want you to put your personal statement, whatever, wherever that's at. I want you to put your activities list, AKA your brag sheet. I want you to put your additional information section. So that's that section of stuff that we'll talk about later. That's like anything else you want them to know about you. And then your supplemental essays for the schools that you're most excited about. So let's say you're applying early decision, early action. Put those essays right there. So that essentially you have one Google Doc, and it's going to be like, I don't know, 10 pages or something, that's going to have all the different pieces of you. The value of doing this on a Google Doc is that you're going to be able to see how, now that you've kind of worked on these pieces on, in different Google Docs and, maybe on, I don't know, in different places, but you're going to be able to see them all in one place and essentially have a mirror and be able to see what is it that you're revealing. That's going to give you some information. But what I want to encourage you to do is do what I call a values scan. And a values scan is simply put, I'm going to share my screen again. If you just Google values scan college essay guide, but we'll put the link in the chat in just a second, you'll see this list of values. So check this out. So I just Googled values exercise. You'll see this list of values. So what I want to encourage you to do is to go through your application, like paragraph by paragraph, sentence by sentence, and I want you to highlight specific moments, specific like sentences where you're revealing these values. So let's say, for example, you're writing about your love of, I don't know, playing the guitar. That's something that you could highlight and just in the Google Doc on the comment, just be like creativity or hashtag creativity. Or maybe there's an activity that you worked on where you were working to find more gender balance in the club. And so maybe that's the value of inclusion. So the purpose of this is that once you're done with your application, part of this is to, number one, hopefully help you build some confidence that different sides of you are coming through in the application. The second value of doing this, or the purpose of doing this, is to maybe reveal where there's kind of some repetition. So let's say, for example, you want to demonstrate hard work. Well, look at this. Look at this magic that's happening behind me. It could be that in your application, you're just showing hard work again and again and again and again. Well, that could be a signal that there's maybe room for some more variety to show some different values in your application. The third potential use of this exercise is to, if you read whole paragraphs and there are just like no values coming through, that could be a signal to you that there could be something that you could potentially tweak in that paragraph to bring in more sides of yourself. So just to recap, the first thing that I think you can do to sort of make sure your application is doing its job is to create that almost done doc, right? And then do a value scan where you go through sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph. This is when I'm reading an application, I'm looking for what are the values that are coming through, because that's going to give you the information that's going to tell me what you're bringing to a college campus. Okay. Second thing that I think you can do is to look at your personal statement, and I want you to ask several questions. So I'm going to do kind of like, two forks diverging in a yellow wood. So if you're writing a personal statement and your essay is not primarily about challenges you faced, this is often what we call a montage essay. Here are 4 questions that you can ask of your personal statement, okay? And you can write these down if you want. Write these down as we go. Number 1, is it clear what my topic is? Probably in the first 2 paragraphs. If you're like at the 3rd or 4th paragraph and it's not clear what your topic is, I would encourage you to clarify the topic in the first 2 paragraphs, because the reader can get impatient and be like, what are we even talking about here? Question 1, is it clear what my topic is? Parentheses, probably in the first 2 paragraphs. Number 2, are the examples that I give in each paragraph strong, specific, and visual? And by strong, by the way, I mean specific and visual. Strong could also just mean that it was like, something that was important to you or something that you definitely want to show that isn't elsewhere in your application. Specific in the sense of like, are you using some details that are going to set your example apart from another student's example? And visual, if it's visual, it's going to help us see the example. And Diana, thank you, is posting these questions in the chat, so you'll have them. Number 3, is it clear what values I'm trying to show in each paragraph? So, and I'll give you some examples, and when we go through the big application. Is it clear the main idea that you want to communicate? Like, so let's say you want to communicate about creativity. Is that clear from the paragraph? Maybe you want to communicate about your commitment to inclusion. Is that clear from the paragraph? And you can do this with the values scan, okay? 4th, are there at least 2 to 3 insights in the personal statement? And by insights, I mean so what moments where you say something that the reader probably doesn't know about you, or maybe wouldn't expect you to say. And you're probably doing this right now. You can scan your personal statement to ask yourself these questions. Okay. Topic 1. 2, examples that are strong, specific, and visual. Look at this little thumbs up here. 3, values. Are the values clear? And then 4, 2 to 3 insights. Okay. I know that's a lot, but I'm hoping that this is, you can, if you need to watch this later, you can watch it and pause the video, watch it later. Okay. Some of you have written about challenges in your personal statement. And for you, the questions that I want to encourage you to ask are a little bit different. For you, I want you to ask yourself, is it clear what the challenges were? Like, just look at the first paragraph or the first and second paragraph and go, is it clear if you're writing about challenges, what those are? Or maybe it takes too long to get to them. Can you get those into the first 2 paragraphs? And second, is it clear what the effects of those challenges were on you? So I'll give you a quick example. If I said my parents were divorced my senior year of high school, which is true for me, I can't assume that you know what the impacts of that were on me without you telling me. So what were the effects? And you can think of the effects as being like sort of external in your world. What changed in your world based on whatever you experienced, whatever the challenge was? And how is your challenge or your experience of that challenge different from someone else who might have experienced a similar challenge? So let's say someone else listening to this experienced divorce in their family. Well, how is your experience of that, the impacts of that, different from mine? And you don't know what mine are, so you just probably need to include some details to show what the impacts were. Third, have you clarified, probably in the middle of the essay, what you did to overcome the challenges that you mentioned? And finally, is it clear, probably in the last paragraph or 2, what you learned from your experiences? Now, oftentimes when students are writing about challenges, most of the essay is about the challenge, and then there's a little bit on what they did and a little bit on what they learned. I want to encourage you to kind of take a 1/3 approach, where it's like the challenges and the effects are like kind of in the first third of the essay, first 200, 250 words. The middle 200, 250 are about what you did, and the final 200, 250 are about what you learned from the experience. Okay? 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 if you can there. So just to recap, challenges and effects, are they clear? Are they in the first third-ish of your essay? What you did about it, that's in the middle. And then what you learned, that's towards the end. All right. I know I'm giving you lots, but I'm going to keep moseying forward because some of you mentioned in the chat, up-leveling your activities list. So let me share with you a resource. And I'm just going to share with you the resource that we're going to share as a follow-up in the comments in the Google Doc. No, not in the Google Doc, in the chat. I'm on a Google Doc, but here are some tools for up-leveling your activities list. So your activities list is essentially your brag sheet. And the reason I think it's good to up-level it is that if you just say like art, and then your description is like created art and organized club, the reader might be like, okay, I probably could have maybe guessed that. But if instead your description reads more like organized and ran meetings, set up field trips, brainstormed and created group art activities, wrote and sent newsletter to members, then I'm like, cool. Now I get a much better sense of all the things that you're into and that you've done with this particular activity. So here are 3 exercises that I recommend. First is what I call this epic list of activities list verbs. And if you've been on one of my sessions in past years, counselors, you probably know this and maybe hopefully use it. So essentially what this is let me just show it to you. I'm going to have to share and unshare just because of the way the sharing works on this platform. Okay, here we go. So this is what I call the epic list of activities list verbs. What it's going to do is it's going to get you to remember a lot of the stuff you forgot for the activities that you're listing. So if, for example, one of the things that I did in high school was theater. And I go, okay, well, I did theater. Did I have some leadership skills? Okay, maybe. I look at this list, coordinated. Did I coordinate anything for theater? Yeah, you know what? I did coordinate a couple fundraisers for our theater program. Directed. Oh, you know what? I did direct some stuff. I I actually directed some student shows. So that could be some stuff that I did. Whoops, I'm going to stop clicking this because it just messes me up. People skills, communication. Let's see, authored, collaborated. Ooh, that's a stronger verb. Instead of just like worked with, I collaborated with other, theater makers. Created original works would maybe be something that I would put in my theater description. So essentially what you're using this is to up level your descriptions so that it gives more information about the range of different responsibilities that you've had related to whatever your activity is. And I want to challenge y'all who've done like common sports or common instruments. Don't be like, I just played the violin or I just played volleyball. Like you can probably find a whole bunch of different ways of thinking about all the responsibilities you've had. Okay. Number 2. Here's the second one. It's what I call the BB's exercise, which is the best extracurricular activity brainstorm I've ever seen. So if once you've looked at the activities list, verbs, the verbs activities, the epic list of activities list verbs, I know, long titles for these, you find that you're like, I just don't feel like I have enough content yet. There's this list of questions that has, if you answer these, besides what you did, what are the problems you solved, lessons you learned, skills you gained, impact that you had, or how you applied what you learned, that's going to give you even more ideas. And this is going to be plenty to fit into your short descriptions, because these descriptions are only 150 characters. So it's going to be about this long. Some of you know this already, but it's going to be about this long. But if you're struggling to be like, what do I put in there? This BB's exercise is going to give you tons of stuff to put in there. Okay. And underneath this, you'll see an example of, a student who did this. And then underneath this, you'll see a bunch of different questions that you can use to brainstorm more content. And I don't think you need to, do like 20 minutes on every single activity. Probably if you spend even 5 minutes per activity, you're going to come up with some more ideas here. Okay. The third one is the exercise that I mentioned of the value scan, which is to say, going through what are the values that are clearly being revealed in your description, which values are kind of there, but can maybe be clearer. And finally, which values are not in your description at all, but maybe could be included. And in the resource that we'll share in the chat, or Diana probably already shared it, you'll see an example of how to up-level these. Okay. So that's kind of like I guess the third thing that I want you to be thinking about in terms of focusing on. The fourth one, I'm going to kick it over to Tom for a minute, and we're going to switch roles, and I'm going to be answering questions in the chat, is thinking about those supplemental essays. So Tom, some people are brand new and don't even know what a supplemental essay is. Will you share what are supplemental essays? Give a little context for your background with supplemental essays. And then what are the 2 things that you feel like students should really focus on to make the most of theirs?
Awesome. Great question, Ethan. So supplemental essays, just to give you a quick little crash course, are in contrast to the personal statement, which Ethan was just speaking about a little bit. At College Essay Guide, we recommend 2 particular approaches to that narrative-based challenges essay that Ethan shared, or a montage essay, which is weaving together different moments of your life that show different core values and have different insights and realizations that you've come to in your life as part of a cohesive body of work, 650 words. So those are sent to all the colleges that you apply to. Your personal statement is uploaded to the Common Application. You send it out to any school that uses the Common App, or even schools like, Georgetown or MIT or other schools. They don't actually use a personal statement, but anyway, that's one option. And that's meant to be, I'd say, a chance for you to share broad sides of yourself and help the reader kind of build a connection and get to know who you are. Supplemental essays have a degree of that, but unlike the Common Application, where it's sent to every single school, these are school-specific prompts that colleges individually chose to write and send out themselves to students who are applying as a signal about their own core values, things that they care about, and their mission and vision as an institution. That is really kind of like the rationale behind why colleges choose to include supplemental essays. They are folding in an additional tool or metric as part of their application process to identify more qualities, experiences, potentially institutional priorities that a student may meet for a college. We have a lot of content about that if you are not familiar with that term. But that really is kind of what they're meant to do, right? So you'll see kind of, I'd say, 4 general buckets of these types of responses. One is kind of what we would call like a why us essay. So that's essentially where a college asks you, why do you want to go to Claremont McKenna College? Another one would be a why major essay. So kind of having you write a little bit about why you're interested in the academic area that you've indicated on your application, or why you are undecided at this moment in time. Then there's also a lot of extracurricular kind of based essays, or essays that ask you to kind of talk about a moment of impact or a moment where you improved your community. And then another one might be a fourth one that I'd say is particularly relevant this year are essays around identity, and particularly around contributing an identity to a campus environment. So this can include reflections about your identity in terms of your hometown, where you come from, your race or ethnicity, your sexuality, your gender. It really is very multifaceted and broad in terms of what you can respond to with these particular prompts. But those, I'd say, are kind of some four of the more common themed essays that you're going to see as part of this process if you decide that you want to apply to colleges that have supplemental essays. In terms of the two main qualities that I think are important for you to keep in mind with supplemental essays, the first would be what you would contribute. So oftentimes, especially because a lot of students, want to show colleges that they know how many great things the school has, they'll spend a lot of their time on their supplemental essays talking about all the great things that the college has that they can take advantage of, right? And my advice for you is to establish a sense of reciprocity with the college, right? They know what they have to bring to the table. They know how great they are. That's something that the people on the admissions team are more familiar with. But what they don't know as much of is what you're bringing to the table. They might have clues from your activities list. They might have, maybe some examples or things that you've shared in your personal statement can help them make those connections. But typically they explicitly write certain questions, especially if they're asking you, what would you contribute to this school, or what intrigues you about this school? They want to get a sense for, okay, you get what we are bringing to the table. You understand our values, you understand our curriculum, you understand the unique, approach that we have to whether it's an open curriculum or not. They want a sense that you kind of understand the school that you're applying to, and you're not a random ghost stealth app who just sent in an app because, oh, my mom told me this is a good school, or I saw it on some ranking, right? There's a lot of kids who are like that. So showing your research and showing that you know a lot about the school is great, but you also have to kind of follow it up with things that you bring to the table as well. A great way to do this is to kind of think about it as how am I going to take it to the next level in college? So to say something like, oh, I've started to dip my toes in biology research as a high school student. I'm super excited to take it to the next level at Johns Hopkins because they have a particular lab that's interested in a specific area of biology that I started to go on a Wikipedia rabbit hole around, right? So even by that sentence there, you're showing that you have prior experience in an area that they also have a lot of resources and an environment to really help you capitalize on it. So to kind of establish that setup essentially in sentences of I've already kind of done a little bit of this as a high school student based on what's available to me in my own home environment. And I'm eager and excited to take it to the next level at a place that has even more resources, even more opportunities, more different types of people, more ways to make connections, and to, I guess, go further with the values that I've already established. So that's one thing, right, is the contribution piece. The second one is fit. And this can kind of be pretty elusive because, sometimes students don't really know. They hear the word fit and they're like, well, what does that really mean? It can be kind of not very well defined. But essentially, the way that I would think about trying to demonstrate fit for a college is to show that you have an understanding of their mission and values. The best places to find this are college mission statements and strategic plans. So those give you a sense for what the college, in terms of when they were founded way back when, hundreds of years ago maybe, what were the core values that the founders there really wanted the school to be? What population did they want to serve? So one example of this, I mentioned Claremont McKenna College earlier. I used to work at Pomona College, which is right next door. And Claremont McKenna had a very specific mission to serve veterans coming back from World War II to use their GI Bill credits to gain an education. So their whole emphasis and mission and values, and any language that you learn about Claremont McKenna has phrases that center on leadership, it centers on action, it centers on learning by doing, because in their mind, that was a learning style and approach that historically at the time, veterans who were coming back from war, who had to learn on the job right in the moment, had to really learn by doing things, kind of trial by fire. And the qualities that attracted or that veterans were able to build up in themselves were something that the school really wanted to provide a space and a place for them to take that unique learning style and bring it forward. Nowadays, in addition to veteran students, Claremont kind of has students from all over the world from various different backgrounds and interests, but that central kind of valued quality of leadership and of learning by doing are things that they write about very explicitly in their materials, on their webinars, on their mission statement, strategic vision. And that's something that if you are writing essays for a specific college and you look at kind of some of their materials and their language, showing that fit for the particular values that they have explicitly said are a part of what they're all about, either historically or what they're trying to move more towards, is a really great way to kind of have your work stand out a little more in the crowd. So, but two main things to think about in supplements. One is contribution. So not just what they have, but what you bring as well. And the second one is that fit piece, showing that alignment between their values and yours and how you make a perfect match together. That's a little bit about supplements. Happy to answer more because I know we have lots of questions that I'm sure will be coming in.
Great. I was on mute and I was like, I should be unmuted. So thanks. That was lovely.
Yeah.
I want to walk through for about 10-ish minutes. 10-ish, anyone? An application that I really like, and I'm going to share with you a link to this application. So here's a student who I worked with a little while back, and I'll just share with you I'm going to just go to the PDF so you can kind of see where it is. And I want to walk you through the pieces of it. And this is kind of like an almost done doc, so you can kind of see what this looks like. So this is you'll see the personal statement, the activities list, the additional info, the COVID additional info, and the supplemental essays. So in this particular blog that I'm linking to, this is a student who chose to write about race in her application, and she specifically connected mentions of race to essentially skills, qualities, values, and interests that she's going to bring to a college campus. So for those of you, and by the way, this is like a side note, but for those of you who are interested in writing about race in your application, as long as you're connecting it to instances of character or specific, unique qualities, that's what colleges need in order to consider that as part of your application, according to the Supreme Court decision. More inside the blog that we'll link. But for those of you who aren't writing about race, this application is still going to be a good example because essentially you'll see how this student is bringing skills, qualities, values, and interests into her application. So I'm not going to read all the application, but I'm going to just kind of give you the high level view of it. And essentially, and feel free to, if you've got questions, you can ask Tom in the chat. He's answering now, and we'll do Q&A, and in case you're joining late, we're giving away a free complete application review, $497 value at the end of the session. So stay tuned. Diana, thank you, Diana. We'll put a link to that in the chat here. Okay. So this is a student who faced some challenges at home as it related to her personal and family life. And she describes those challenges in brief in the first couple paragraphs. She describes about leaving, going to live with her, her grandparents, and connecting deeper with her heritage, in this case, her Mexican heritage, and becoming more interested gradually with questions pertaining to her own community. And she lists some questions that she's interested in exploring. For example, how can we reconstruct our legal frameworks to better reflect the humanity and rights of asylum seekers? Now, I know that's a very specific question, but a question that just like one specific question like that can reveal so many different values. So quick side note, again, whether you're writing about race and culture or not, is this. If you're interested in showing the way that your brain works, give us a specific question that you're interested in exploring in college and beyond. In this case, this one question helps us see that she's got an interest in critical thinking, she's interested in social justice, and she's interested in helping others. I'm sure you could name other values, but like one question reveals at least 3 values right there. She talks about contributing to her community and getting involved in politics a little bit. And then she talks about wanting to be the change that she wants to see in the world. And she talks a little bit about some of the things that she's interested in exploring in the future in political science and sociology, with a concentration in public policy. She says, in particular, I want to create legislation relating to humanitarian causes such as immigration reform and the slaughter of our society through the ease of gun attainment. So in here, you get, I get a sense of courage, and there's a commitment to social justice. And I also get, there's a sense of purpose as she's talking about this. And she says at the end, who knows, perhaps one day I'll be the one knocking on doors, bringing hope instead of heartbreak. Because something at the beginning of her essay is that someone had knocked on her door and it had really turned her world upside down. So I know I kind of went through that application really fast. It was kind of like the 2-minute version of it. But for those of you who are interested, I'll just put it, I think Diana probably did it, but I'll just put it again in the chat if you're interested in seeing the sort of the full version of this particular essay. Okay. Scrolling down, just so you can kind of see an example of this. In each of your activities, you can reveal different values. So for her, for example, she was a senior mentor at this college club. And the description here is like she guides mentees academically, provides unconditional support, facilitates structure to help change the trajectory of their lives, and then simply roots for them. So qualities that I see here are like, again, her commitment to helping others, showing love and support. You could also argue that there are others. Mentorship is kind of, the values are kind of clear from that one. But I think this is especially important if it's not going to be obvious. So let's say, for example, science club. So science club, there might be some things that we're like, oh yeah, sharing knowledge of science. But here's what she says: lead weekly meetings, facilitate demonstrations and fundraisers, coordinate annual science night, advocate for STEM. So cool, that's kind of what you might expect from a science club description. But what you'll notice when I get to it in just a second, in her additional info section, she shares that there's another value of the science club that shows another side of her. So this shows, yeah, leadership and helping others, but I'll share with you the other one in just a second. My point here, in like slowly walking or kind of quickly walking through this activities list, is that each one of these can show different sides of you. So this one, for example, she advocates for reproductive health. She, leads phone bank trainings and mobilized supporters by grassroots organizing. So this is all showing her, again, commitment to politics, social justice, etc. Okay. Underneath this, somebody mentioned earlier in the chat, you feel like you don't have enough room in the additional info COVID section to talk about what you did and what you learned. That's often true for a first draft. I want to encourage you to see if you can squish the challenges and effects into the first paragraph, like she does here, and just make it really straightforward so that in the second paragraph, you emphasize what you did and what you learned. Now, if you're somebody listening to this and you're like, well, I didn't really experience a ton of challenges, or it's been a while, I can't really remember. One thing that students will sometimes do is they'll talk about certain values that they chose to take to the next level. So maybe you had a renewed commitment to your health or your mental health. What did you do specifically to help, stay committed to your health or your mental health? And you can focus on that if you want. It doesn't have to be necessarily a challenge-focused, description here in your additional info section. Okay. In the additional info section, this is that section of your application where you're basically allowed to kind of talk about whatever you want. I love it when students take advantage of this section. Now, I don't want you to stress out and think like you have to put something here, because you actually don't. You can put nothing here and it's fine. But one of the things that she focuses on is that in her particular school, she didn't come from what we'll call a college going culture by her. This is her own words. But, so she wasn't told to take AP classes. When she found out about AP Environmental Science, when she was in high school, she advocated to the teacher and she's like, hey, I really want to take this class. She was allowed to take the class. She self-studied for it, and she became one of the first freshmen to pass an AP exam at her school. Now, for those of you who are listening and you're like, yeah, I feel like I have some of those achievements where I was the first at my school to do this or do that. That's the kind of stuff that might end up in your counselor letter. So your high school counselor might be putting that in their letter, but they might not be. Or you could be listening to this and you're like, I don't really have a high school counselor. And so I want to encourage you to consider, are there aspects of yourself that you feel like maybe didn't fit into your personal statement, and maybe you haven't found a way to work them in your activities list, that you're like, oh, maybe I could mention that in the additional information section. And the key when you're scanning the additional info should I put this in there or not, is to ask yourself this question: does this inclusion help the reader make a more informed decision about my application? In other words, are you giving them more information that helps them understand why you're going to contribute something of value to campus? So in this example, this is the kind of student that is going to advocate for herself. She's going to be a self-starter. She's going to self-study. And I look at this and I'm like, wow, I want this kind of person on my campus. Some other examples. She's played mariachi. So this is like music since she was 7 years old. She didn't really have another place to expand on that. She wanted to put it just in a little bit more in her application here. Here's the science club mention. So she didn't feel like she could really put this in, or she didn't have room. She says, it's more than just a club for me. Latinx representation is needed in STEM, which is why I lead the free community science night to engage Latinx youth. That's something that she felt was a really important value that she wanted to include. So she worked that in here. What else? Let's see. She went to a summer institute on medical ignorance. She also, did a summer program that she wanted to work in. She also noted that she was the first student from her school to ever set foot on Stanford's campus as a summer school student. And what she's doing here is she's trying to basically say to the reader, hey, I'm not just a student of privilege who can just kind of go wherever and do anything. Like, I'm actually the first in my school to actually do something like this. So another example of this is she does this, let me see. Oh, the college visitation trips. So she, first of all, puts that she was selected to go on these college visitation trips. And then she notes, as low-income students, we planned and financed the entire trip. So it's not like, yeah, I just was able to like travel wherever and do whatever. I actually, we financed the trip. I don't know how she exactly fundraised. Some students will include details like that. But those are the kinds of like, in between, the stuff that might get otherwise, the reader's not going to know about unless you really tell them. So again, I don't want you to like stress out about this and think you have to fill this section like this student did. But I think if there are certain details about your upbringing, your high school context, your community context that you feel could give the reader, again, make a more informed decision about your candidacy, I think it could be important to include some of those things. Okay. So again, I put the link in the chat. So if you want to look through that, and if it might give you some ideas. Additional awards. So like she had additional awards that didn't fit. So she included those as well. Okay. So she was applying to Yale, which, fun fact, she ended up getting into. And she, in her supplemental essays, does some really nice things. I think Tom was saying she's demonstrating fit to major, fit to the school, but she's also showing why she's going to be a good fit for her particular major. And in here, Yale asked specifically, why do these particular academic areas appeal to you? So I'm not going to go through the whole essay, but she talks about specific details from her life that demonstrate how she's gotten into this particular, like why she's interested in this particular major. In the, what is it about Yale that has led you to apply? She says, as an FGLI, which stands for First Gen Low Income Student, Chicanx, Justice Warrior, and Social Pioneer, Yale is the place for me to develop my identities and give as much as I take. There's a little, I just noticed there's a dangling modifier there, but fun fact, you can get into Yale even if you have a dangling modifier in your supplemental essay. But essentially, she talks about this particular program that she's interested in, and then she gets into the particularities of that program. She wants to take women's self-narratives course. She wants to go attending Cena a las Seis and go to empanadas at La Casa Cultural. So there are specific things that aren't going to be at other campuses. And that's the key to a great YSSA. Tom mentioned this earlier, but what are the specifics about insert name of school that other students aren't going to be writing up necessarily, and that you can continually connect back to show other sides of things that you're into. Okay. In the short answers, not all schools have short answers. She does a nice job of giving specifics that, again, aren't going to be in somebody else's essay. So what inspires you? She could have put long walks on the beach, or, watching Shark Tank, or I don't know, something that's like someone else could have put. But instead, look what she puts. What inspires you? My abuelo's naturalization documents, the smell of petrichor, the feeling of placidity after meditating, seeing a sparkle in someone's eyes when they speak about something they genuinely love. Now, these underwent a couple of drafts, but I want you to, if you are writing short answers, or if you have a little one that's like, 5 to 25 words, ask yourself, am I making the most of this opportunity by showing different values? And in this case, I see values connected to her family, nature, self-care. She talks about meditating, mindfulness, and then also empathy. Like, you really get a sense that she cares about people and cares about the things that they care about. So you can look at these sort of on your own if you like. I love how clever she is, even when she's talking about serious topics. So you're teaching a Yale course. What's it called? The Red Stain Across History, a historical look at the taboos, magical theories, and gender stereotypes surrounding menstruation. So again, another value there that she's bringing in. And we get her wit, we get her, a commitment to intellectual vitality. And again, I want to say that this is going to work for those of you students who are like, but I don't have these cultural things. You've got things that you care about, that you're interested in. The question is, what values are you revealing when you're talking about these things? And how are they showing variety in your application? Some schools will ask you about something that's been intellectually exciting for you. So like Yale asks about this, Stanford asks about this. I know, sorry, we're mentioning a lot of selective schools, but Oftentimes, again, as Tom mentioned, those are the students who are on these webinars. You know, if they're asking and they use the word intellectual in the prompt, they're probably wanting to know, can you do, you know, our college level work? So can you do Yale level work? So what I want to encourage you to do is to bring your A game in terms of the specifics of whatever thing you're talking about. And in this case, she's talking about research, she's talking about legislation, immigration, and she's using some like elevated language here. So I like to tell students for this one, like, you want to kind of try to sound like a grad student here. And by that, I mean, you know, using phrases here, like she's talking about impacts of her on her community on a social and systemic level. So there's lots of specific things that she's done related to this particular topic, but I really want to encourage y'all to like ask yourself, okay, how could I prove to them that I'm really able to do the work that's going to be required at this particular institution? Okay. There's another one. I don't know if Yale's still using this prompt, but what's like an engagement with the community that you belong to? And in this case, you know, she felt like it was really important that she gets this side of, you know, of her, this mariachi that she loves to play. And this mariachi essay was so good. I was like, I just think you should reuse it again and again. So another thing that we're big on is using what we call super essays, which is to say an essay that you feel like reveals a lot about you and that you can use for lots of different schools. The way to do that is reverse engineer. And what I mean by that is essentially when you think you've got a great topic that's going to work for lots of different prompts, put it on your Google Doc and put all the prompts above it. And as you're writing or even brainstorming your essay, do it in such a way that will answer all the different prompts that you think it could work for. It might be kind of confusing at first, but if you can brainstorm the right content, ultimately you're going to be including lines that work for different prompts that's going to improve that essay. Okay. Sometimes students will try to stretch this too far and they'll be doing it on something like, you know, an essay that is clearly, you know, needs to just be a different essay. So, you know, don't go bananas with this, but hopefully you'll be able to reuse your essays, because colleges don't call up each other and they're like, hey, did you read, you know, Joselina's mariachi essay? Like, they don't communicate about stuff like that. Okay. A sort of like final takeaway before we're going to share the form one more time. And I want to encourage you, if you're interested in, you know, getting a free complete app review, we'll tell you more about that in a second, to fill out the form. But a thing that I want to kind of say to y'all is, if you're watching all this and you're feeling like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of work to do before the early action, early decision deadlines, like, I want to just release the pressure valve and say, if you feel like your application, if you're, for example, somebody mentioned, I'm just starting my early decision application. If you feel like your application could benefit from more work, I want to say you don't have to apply early action, early decision. Or if you do decide to do it, know that your application isn't necessarily like the final be all end all that you're going to use for all schools. So one of the things that the Common App allows you to do is, once you submit your application, you submit it to one school, and then you can go in and you can edit it. You can edit that personal statement. You can edit that activities list. So rest assured that this isn't like the be all end all that has to represent you to all the colleges. Okay. So just want to like, and if you're not sure if that's true, if you're like, is that definitely true? You can message the Common App and ask them, because their customer service is actually really good. The other thing I want to say about just kind of like mental state around this whole process is, sometimes students will ask questions that I sense are things that they can't control. So you might ask, for example, you know, if I don't have X or Y, is that bad? Like, if I don't have awards, is that bad? Well, you can't control this at this point. You can't just like make up awards or go out and win a bunch of awards right now. So like, why even obsess over it? Why focus on it? Ask yourself this question: what is it that I can control right now? I can't control how many awards or extracurriculars I have. I can't control that class I took or didn't take. What can I control right now? And you can probably control what time you're spending tonight or today or this week on your application and essays. You can probably control the decision on whether or not to apply early decision or not. These are the kinds of things that you can actually do. And I feel like, and I think we feel like that's where the power is thinking about, what are the things that I actually have some control over. If there are things that you're not sure about, ask your counselor. Please, I feel like I'm beating the drum often with this, but like, your counselor is such an awesome resource, and they're there for you, and they want to answer your questions. If you've got questions that are specific to a college, You can also reach out to the college, because that's the job of college admission officers, is to answer some of your questions. Do some research to make sure it's not easily Googleable. But I want to encourage you to use those adults that you might be like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to bother them. Like, bother college admission officers. Start to develop a relationship with them, a rapport. Make sure that you are cordial in the email and that you thank them and those kinds of things. But don't be shy about asking, college admission officers. So pausing for a second, Tom, will you tell folks just a little bit more about Complete App Review and what it is and how it works? And then we'll do some Q&A. And then at the end, in about 10 minutes, we will choose one lucky winner to win a Complete App Review.
Sure thing. Yeah. Am I on or?
You're on. You're good.
Okay, great. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. I'll go ahead and share my screen just to give you a quick rundown of what the Complete Application Review is. So hopefully you can see this all right. But the Complete Application Review is essentially, if you are a student who has, you already have a personal statement completed, you have supplemental essays for at least one college, an activities list, maybe you potentially have an additional information section that you've been working on for your common application, not required, but we're happy to review that as well. You'll get feedback essentially similar to what Ethan described with the almost done doc at the beginning of this webinar, where you put all of your work into one Google Doc. This is essentially a document that you'll submit to reviewers from our college SEI team. On this page, we actually have a few examples of who they are right here. We have Rula, we have me, we have Allie, we have Andrew, but we also have Megan, we have Marianne, we have a whole bunch of other amazing folks who have lots of years of experience reading over student applications and work and providing that critical feedback to students. So essentially what you'll get is a complete overview of your application with these kind of direct inline edits and comments from a reviewer about ways to uplevel your application. You'll also get a video summary from your reviewer as well, around 5 to 10 minutes. And you'll get a review rubric at the top that kind of identifies the key values that the reviewer saw in your application and their key suggestions for improvement and where to do that. We try to include links to college SEI blogs and resources to help make the most of your file, but it is a one-time asynchronous review. So I want to really clarify that. We added this option in in the portfolio of things that college SEI does, because we know that a lot of students work on their college essays autonomously on their own or with an outside source. We do offer, of course, one-on-one essay and application support through our one-on-one services offering. That's something that if you are someone who likes a lot of back and forth and to hash out tons of ideas and you're really in that ideation and iteration stage, this review offering's not probably really the best option for you, because it's meant to be kind of finalized drafts that you want another set of eyes on, and you want an expert opinion on to get that and to learn more about how to improve your application before you submit it. So just want to make that distinction that there's not going to be like a back and forth Zooms or convos with the reviewer. It's asynchronous, but definitely a really, really great offering if you want that peace of mind and additional feedback.
Thank you.
So that's that.
Lovely, thank you. So I want to answer what some of the folks were saying in the chat about could we highlight different quote unquote types of students in the examples, because some folks are like, well, what if I'm not an immigrant student who's faced challenges? And I just want you to know we've got all kinds of resources for you. So I'm going to steal back, if I may, Tom, the sharing. So look at that. I love when I like mute it or when I screen share when I'm doing like a ridiculous face on YouTube. Look at this. That's like caught me mid blink. Okay. So if you Google or go to YouTube, 3 awesome personal statements that aren't on challenges, there's a 15-minute walkthrough of 3 different essays that I find to be pretty awesome. And I'll put that link in the chat. And it walks through and shows a lot of the same qualities that I've talked about. The reason I chose to focus on this particular application with Joselina is I think in terms of socially where we are, there are a lot of students out there who are wondering, can I talk about race? So I wanted to make sure that I'm speaking to that student population, because that feels like a big question that's out there right now. But in addition to that, I'll share this resource. If you Google personal statement examples, college essay guide, you'll see a whole bunch of different student essays that are writing about lots of different topics. And then for folks who are looking about like activities, somebody was asking about activities, like she seems to have really awesome activities. And somebody asked like, what are some other activity examples? If you Google 80 plus extracurricular activities, you'll see a whole big list of different activities and descriptions that students have written. So just to speak to that, I mean, probably if you're looking for something on the College Essay Guy website, if you Google like a thing, you can get really specific with what you're Googling, like essays that aren't on challenges, College Essay Guy, and you'll find that. Or, you know, someone was, one of the other resources that I mentioned at the start of the session is like, you know, how to write about yourself, you know, essays that aren't necessarily about trauma or challenges. And that's a resource that we just put out recently. That's linked on the SCOTUS page. I mentioned that one earlier. All right. So what other questions? Let's see.
Yeah, one thing I just want to mention, there's a couple of questions that are like, should I put this here or there? Like, should I put this in the awards or activities? This is a prime example of what I like to call the don't sweat it's and the don't forget it's. One of the biggest pieces of advice I want to leave you with is that students are often used to assessment being you start with 100 points on a test, and based on all the mistakes you make, you lose points and get a lower score. That is not how college admissions works. You are starting at zero, all of you. No one is starting higher than someone else, and you are building a case for yourself in your application for the admissions officer based on the school that they work for to advocate for you to have a spot at their school. Sometimes it's by things that they, you know, are really taken by, but most of the time, especially at these more selective schools, it's based on institutional priorities that your application is meeting, that they, as an admissions officer, are particularly told to keep an eye out for in your application. But of course, regardless of institutional priorities, whether you meet them or not, you don't really have as much of a sense of what that looks like because most schools don't really give you a whole list of kind of their internal rubric or whatnot. But the things that they are looking for typically are connected to the mission and values of the school. So all that to say, questions around like, if I do this, does this get me thrown out? There's very few instances of that. Very, very few. Far less than students think. So for example, the order of your activities, whether it's in the activities section or the awards section, there's slight preferences from individual admissions officer to admissions officer. You get different opinions, but in general, if the information's there, if it's communicating your values, if it's not just slapped together really sloppily, like that is kind of going to, I'd say, be doing its job. That's really the theme of this webinar. So those types of questions, I often try to take students kind of off that plane of thinking, because again, it's not an exam, it's not a test, it is an application, and there is a distinction there in terms of building up a case versus you're getting docked points. They don't even have to write why you get denied. They don't have to say like, oh, -5 for not capitalized here, or -6 because the spacing was off. It's not really something that happens.
Yeah. It's I love that distinction, the counting up versus counting down. You're counting up from zero, just to underline what underscore what Tom said. You're not counting down from perfection. So some folks are asking questions like, you know, somebody got the application in a week thing. If you got the application in a week, you got the common app review, the complete app review thing. So that's included. Let's see. Yeah, thanks, Peter, for answering Margie's question. Great.
A couple of people have actually asked about, can you talk more about insights and so what's? I wrote an answer in the Q&A section of the webinar. So if you want to take a look at that, I tried to give an example of that.
Go for it. Do it.
The best way to think about insights or so what moments is it really is like that kind of light bulb that goes off in your head when you're going through an experience, whether it's related to an activity, a personal experience with your family, anything, you know, any topic in life is fair game when it comes to communicating an insight. And what it is some kind of realization, either a solidification of your values, a shift in the way that you thought about something. There usually is some kind of, if you didn't have a particular experience, you wouldn't have come to a particular realization. If you've had moments like that in your life that have been like, oh, you know, this conversation that I had with a mentor really shifted my perspective on leadership because they told me, or I learned, that it's not about, you know, accolades or credentials. It's more about the way that you show up for other people. Then I started to embody that in my own life. That's an example of an insight. You've come to a realization that you did not have prior, and there was a particular monumental or pivotal experience in your life, a moment in time that caused a shift or a solidification in your thinking. So I hope that just explains a little more what we mean by so what or insight. Because again, sometimes students will kind of write like a laundry list of like, here's all the things that I did. But then at the end, we have no idea around like what that means for them, or are they taking those lessons forward in their life? Or you're just kind of giving a series of a play-by-play of events. or a rundown, essentially, of kind of like a script of like, I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, and this was the end result. How did you feel in that moment when you got to the end result? Did you realize that a certain strategy pays off, or that, you know, as you were going through it and there were challenges, I realized that I can only control what I can control, and now I try to embody that in my own life? That was an insight moment that we shared on this webinar. So hopefully that just gives you a little bit more clarity around what those types of revelations are. And they're so, so valuable in these essays because, again, they show critical thinking and they show reflective habits that you're able to go back to your life, think about moments in time that have been influential, and communicate why that was to an audience member who doesn't know, or an audience member, a reader who doesn't know as much about your life and what you've been through.
Kind of an audience member. Let me show, I love that. And I want to give you another framework for thinking about this. This is like a graph to illustrate what insight looks like to me. So if you imagine that this maze represents all known knowledge, and everything that's in this circle represents what you know, and then everything that's in this circle represents what someone else knows, what insight is the stuff that's in here. And I know that sounds like, yes, that's kind of obvious, but if you're saying something that's like stuff that most people know, that's maybe going to, for the reader, is going to be something like, well, okay, but we kind of knew that. And that's oftentimes what happens at the ends of paragraphs. Like we read and we go, well, we kind of knew you were going to say that. So when it comes to insights, you're either going to want to share something that's in this sort of like something that you know that maybe the reader doesn't. And by the way, that could be information about yourself or your own realizations, because you're the best expert on yourself. Or if you do decide to share something that's something that most people know, you're going to want to use uncommon language, which is to say, share it in a way that we haven't heard before, or might be a little bit unexpected. Second, another question that somebody asked, which was, how do you decide what to write about for your personal statement? You did the values exercise. I don't think the values exercise, Gwen, is the best way to brainstorm in terms of like your topics. I think the values exercise is good for a lot of different things, but a better exercise, if you go to the YouTubes and just Google 7 personal statement topics, there's this video that I put out a couple of years ago, and it's how to brainstorm 7 different personal statement ideas. And that, to me, it's like a 20-minute video, but I think might be a more effective one for getting you to brainstorm actual ideas. So I would recommend that one. So Google how to brainstorm. Actually, I'll just give you the link. It's gonna be loud for a second. Okay, but I'll just put the link in the chat. I think that'll be a better video for brainstorming actual topic ideas. The values are going to help you figure out what to say about the topic. We're going to do one more question, and then we're going to pick a winner on the form. And I think we'll pick the winner like this. Tom, pick a number between 1 and 11.
6.
All right, 6. So what I'm going to do is either Tom or I are going to answer one more question, and then I'm going to count 6 backwards. No, maybe I'm going to count the 6th person to fill out the form. Maybe I'll do that. So I'll figure out who that was in just a second. Tom, do you see any questions coming through that you haven't been able to answer yet that you want?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions asking, should I put this in the additional information section? I had a hard time with the IB curriculum in my school because there wasn't as many courses for art. I learned a language, but I don't know if I'm fluent or not. Is this details I should include? We actually have a blog that covers lots of different examples of what can be included in the additional information section. My general rule of thumb is that if there are things about your life experience or circumstances that you feel like, oh, gee, if I had 5 minutes in front of someone and I want them to kind of have like a little like asterisk or caveat of like, oh, I didn't have these courses available, or I had mono when I was in 11th grade, so that's why I had this huge dip in grades, or I come from a small town where not a lot of people go to college, and I'm the first one kind of doing this, and I'm, just trying to find and leverage resources that I can, but I just want you to know kind of that, this is the world that I'm coming from. It really, additional info truly is like a blank slate for you to use to your liking. Individual admissions officers, of course, have different preferences around like, oh, I prefer bulleted things, as opposed to like full block paragraphs. We kind of try to synthesize at College Essay Guide the majority of the best practices that we know about anecdotally from professional colleagues, other folks who work in admissions. But again, that's kind of an area that you can't really control. Like some person might be reading your additional information section and be like, this isn't quite as relevant to our college institution, whatnot. And another person at another college might be like, oh, I'm so glad the student included this, right? So if there are, again, things that you feel are unsaid or not as fully flushed out as you would like them to, there are general tips that we like to give around that I'll share here. Like, a lot of the students sometimes can get a little perfectionisty with additional info. So they'll like try to talk about a time where they got an A- instead of an A. And in the grand scheme of the world, like that is not really a lot of airtime that you need to be spending explaining to someone. It's more about like substantial deviations from the norm and the precedent that you've set with your grades or your academic background. Any of those kind of like more noticeable anomalies, bigger dips, bigger question marks are typically, situations where the additional information is helpful, or larger elaborations around passion projects you have, things that were more self-directed that kind of had a lot of steps to them or lots of layers, or you evolved and moved up in leadership based on a particular initiative in your school, and the 150 character description in the activities list is not doing it justice or not representing that to its fullest. Yeah, there's lots of examples on that blog that kind of give you a little more of that, I guess, should I or shouldn't I? But in general, again, I think if you're feeling really strongly about it, it makes sense to include.
Okay. I think now it's funny in the chat. People are like, I can't even focus because who's going to get the free review? I'm going to tell you, I've got a name in just a second. I want to say, like, I'm glad. I'm also glad that so many of you all stayed to the end. I want to encourage y'all to like continue to use the free resources we have on the site. We've got so much. Probably if you are looking for a thing, if you Google it, plus college essay guide, and it's related to college admissions, we put something out on it. If not, let us know because we'll put together something. I love looking at the love you're getting. Temi says, Yom, you're so real. He is so real. And for those of you who are like worried about the additional info section, don't. So many students every year get in to great colleges by putting 0 in the additional info. So if none of this stuff applies to you, or you're like, I'm stressing, don't stress. This is not like one more thing to think about. It's just like, we wanted to offer this as something else because there are some of you out there who are like, yeah, I do totally have things that I feel like I couldn't put elsewhere. Put in the additional info. All right, here we go. The winner is, and this was the 6th person to submit. Let me just double check. Okay, the winner. I'm trying to like create drama around this. Huy, Huy Nguyen. Congrats. I'm gonna email this to Tom, and Tom is gonna actually like legit email you, Huy, so that you'll be able to get the free review. So congrats and thanks for being here. I hope you're here still. If not, he'll just get a nice, or they'll just get a nice surprise in their inbox. But we're so glad you're here, that you're part of our community, that you showed up, and now everybody's leaving the webinar. And please let us know how we can help. All right. Much love to you all, and have a great rest of your process. We'll be back the reason why we don't do too many webinars close to the deadline is that students are getting really stressed, and really it's just time to like focus in and work. So that's why we did this one like, a couple weeks before the deadlines, but we'll be back in November with more sessions. All right. Much love. See you soon.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.